Namaste, nerds. This is Navinad, Budget Pub Stomper. Today we're going to be talking about Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. This is one of the very first budget competitive decks that I ever built. I still have it in paper. I submitted a $500 and a $1,000 version to the Budget Brews CEDH and they both got accepted. I think they're there to this day. I haven't been working on them. I probably should update them. Timmy T 2000, if you're listening, I apologize. I'll get to it. But it's I've been thinking about this, and it's like it's kind of crazy to me that I haven't done this commander yet, because this was one of the I think it's one of the absolute best commanders that you can build at $100 competitive. I know it. I've played it. I've played it in paper. I've seen it in action. There was not a friend exactly, but somebody I used to brew with a little bit, talk with a bit on the Budget Brews Discord, who just asked permission to use my exact list at the CBB 100, and of course I didn't. I don't own the list, right? And I think it was I thought it was great that they wanted to play my list, so of course I gave permission, and they used my list, and I heard from that person and other people, the people that they played against, that the deck went freaking nuts. I remember there was a meme that one of the opponents of this player sent me, and it was from The Simpsons, the little nerdy guy from The Simpsons sitting on the bus, and it says, hee, we're all in danger. And, they were saying that's basically what they did. They all sat around and watched Selvala go fucking nuts. So that's what I want to provide to you. I want you to be able to go banana sandwich while all of your opponents look and watch on in jaw-dropped agony as you just storm off and win the game. But we're going to have to talk about how to do that and how we're going to win the game. Real quick, but I'm going to back up a little bit. I want to say the reason that I haven't gotten to Selvala yet is because I did Marwyn early on, because somebody directly requested Marwyn. And Marwyn and Selvala are so very similar that I wanted to put a lot of distance in between the two. I wanted to make sure I had a lot of content on the channel before I went back into mono green, a big dork in the command zone land. But I feel like we've grown, you and I, together. We've been on this journey for long enough now that we're going to go back full circle and revisit mono green, kind of elf stormy deck design and see what we can do with Selvala. Now, that could beg the question, well, which one's better? Which one ought I play? And I don't have an answer for that. I've not played Marwyn. I've goldfished Marwyn a lot. So far on the channel, it's been the deck that's gotten the most consistent turn 3 wins. But I don't know. That was in goldfishing. And in goldfishing, it's really hard to tell, Like, I think Selvala is going to be right there with Marwyn. I think they're going to be very similar in power level. I guess the difference is going to be something like this. Marwyn doesn't require you to play a bunch of really bad cards that you wouldn't play without the commander. You can play you have to play a bunch of dorks and more dorks than you probably want to play, but dorks aren't that bad, especially not in the budget metas. And Selvala does ask a lot of you. It asks you to play 3 mana 8/8s that have cumulative upkeep of punch yourself in the balls. I think that's what this one reads. Phyrexian Soul. Cumulative upkeep. Oh, it's sacrifice a creature. Well, one of the other ones is you have to punch yourself in the balls. So on the first turn, for your cumulative upkeep, you punch yourself once. And then the second turn, you have to punch yourself twice. And so on. But we're not worried about that, because we're going to just drop this beast and just win the game. So back to Selvala. Sorry, I'm kind of my gears are kind of spinning a little bit faster than normal. I apologize. I'm back in it now. So Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. Let's talk about what she does. So she is a mana engine. If you watched my commander video on how to know if a commander card is potentially viable for competitive, there were 5 primary factors, and she checks immediately I think the top 3. She's a mana engine. She's a card advantage engine. And she's a combo piece in the command zone. So we're just there, we're there. So comparing her to Marwyn, Marwyn doesn't draw cards. So you need to find some kind of an outlet with Marwyn, and sometimes Selvala sort of acts like its own outlet, which we'll get into as we talk about the combos in the deck. And this is a convoluted combo soup of a deck. It's like I said about Marwyn, same kind of thing. This deck is almost like its own little universe full of craziness. And I think the best thing to do is to learn a couple of the combos and really focus on those combos. And just as you're playing for those specific win lines, you're going to bump into sideways synergies and interlocking pieces, and you'll figure the deck out as you go. And then we're going to do a part 2 to this. We've got to do the mulligans, if for no other reason than to see how it compares to Marwyn. But Selvala, to read the card, 3 mana, green, green, 1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each other creature's power. Your opponents will not be using that ability very often. It does happen, but your deck is loaded full of 5/5s for 3, 5/5s for 2, 6/6 for 3, 8/8 for 3, so on. Other decks are not like that, and so you're going to be the one proccing Selvala 99% of the time. Then it's got a second ability. Pay 1 green, tap, add X mana in any combination of colors to your mana pool where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So let's just use an example, and this is going to be a pretty common play pattern, or the play patterns you're going to be looking for are going to be versions of this play pattern. Let's say we go turn 1, Boreal Druid, so turn 1, Dork. Turn 2, we cast our Selvala. Turn 3, we have one of these overstatted dudes. This is one of our new pickups, Pugnacious Hammer Skull for 30 cents. Is a 6/6 for 3. It's got some other stats. We're not really worried about the other stats so much. We just want this. We're going to look at these big fatties as basically rituals or mana rocks, I guess, depending. Maybe more like mana rocks. But so this 6/6 for 3, if we go turn 2 Selvala, and then turn 3, we can cast our 3 mana 6/6, and we'll still have 1 mana as long as we're hitting our land drops. To tap to activate Selvala to make 6 mana. And from there, we're hoping to have some way to either just combo off immediately or start drawing cards to work towards comboing off. And so those card draw, the kinds of card draw that we're using in the deck are going to be things like Rishkar's Expertise. So in that previous example where we had a 6/6 out on turn 3 and our Selvala, so we were able to make 6 mana, and we have a 6/6. We could we could cast Rishkar's Expertise and draw 6 cards, and then you can play, because it just says draw cards equal to the greatest power of a creature you control. So you draw 6 cards, and then after you draw those 6 cards, you may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. And so hopefully that is a Shia, and you just can win the game. You can or untap and win the game, or tutor then win the game. But let me talk about so we've got these are kind of the building blocks of the Selvala deck. We've got the big mana dork in the command zone, the overstated creatures like our Hunted Troll that's an 8/4 for 4 that are going to they're going to proc Selvala to draw a card, and they're going to allow us to tap Selvala and 1 green to make oodles of mana, in this case 8 mana. And then we're going to take other cards. One of the other building blocks is going to be ways to convert that huge mana into huge card draw, and that's going to be things like Garruk, which is just going to be a 5 mana sorcery. You're going to use this as a 5 mana sorcery, maybe always. I don't think I've ever actually used this for any other reason, and I've played this deck probably 100 times. So you'll cast this for 5 mana. In that previous example where we had our 6/6 in play, we would neg 3 this thing to draw 6 cards because we have that 6 power creature in play. Then this thing goes into the graveyard, but we drew 6 cards. So we want like the big mana dork, ways to proc its draw ability, like Hunted Troll and Sheltering Ancient, Phyrexian Soul Gorger, Pugnacious, all these guys, Ravaging Riftworm, so on, Relic Golem, Lupine Prototype. So we want the big power dudes that have a low casting cost, so that we can use Selvala to make a ton of mana. Then we want cards like Garruk and what was the other one we just talked about? Rishkar's Expertise, and we've got Soul's Majesty. There's bunches of these that are going to allow us to draw cards equal to the power, the biggest power of a creature that we control. And that's kind of the 1-2-3 punch of the deck that's going to allow us to basically play this deck like a storm deck. This is not a creature beatdown deck. It is a storm deck. And what does a storm deck need? It needs to generate mana and draw cards. And that's what we're doing. We're just doing it in a sort of weird and kind of creature-based way. Like with Disciple of Freyalise, which is another big pickup that we just got, especially for budget. Like, it's not very hard for us to cast Galta. You know, if we have an 8/8 in play, and then we've got our Selvala in play, we can cast this for 2, and it's a 12/12. So it's going to proc Selvala, we'll draw a card, then we'll be able to tap our Selvala for 12 mana. And then assuming we've got any of these Rishkar's Expertise or Return of the Wildspeak or any of the other ones we've talked about so far, Monumentous Fall or Soul's Majesty, Rishkar's Expertise, Life's Legacy, so on, Garruk, then we can convert that mana into card draw. And so we'll draw 12 cards, and then we're going to have still 6 mana floating. And so that's really what we're doing with the deck. And then we have to be able to then convert the card draw and mana into a win. And that's where we're going to get into the combo lines in the deck. And I know usually I start with the combo lines, and I don't know, I guess maybe I ought to have started with the combo lines. But I didn't, and here we are. So let's talk about our main combo. If you're going to try to wrap your brain around any of the combos in this deck, I think the very first thing you should try to figure out is Ashaya with Quirion Ranger. And if you know how Ashaya with Q Ranger works, then you'll also understand how Ashaya works with Scrib Ranger. It's the same combo. It's just a little, it's basically the same thing. If you understand one, you understand both of them. Okay, so what is this combo? Let's say we've got Ashaya and, I don't know, 2 creatures and 3 lands in play. So that will make Ashaya and the creatures and the lands, let's say total, it makes her a 6/6. So Ashaya is a 6/6 because Ashaya, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. But the non-token creatures that you control count as lands, in addition to their other types. So if you have a total of 3 lands, 2 creatures, and Ashaya, then Ashaya is a 6/6. If you have another land and another creature, then she's an 8/8. And so that means that you can tap your Selvala to make 8 mana if Ashaya is an 8/8. But more importantly, it means we can do crazy shit with Rangers. So the power Rangers are Scrib Ranger and Quirion Ranger. Shouldn't Quirion Ranger be... Oh god, apparently I'm not very good at the alphabet. Well, okay, yeah, just looked past her 5 times. Okay, so let's just look at Quirion Ranger, and let's look at Ashaya again. So Ashaya says all of our creatures are lands, forests in specific. And Quirion Ranger says that you can return a forest you control to your hand to untap target creature, but you can only do it once per turn. Okay, so let's say we've got Selvala in play with Ashaya and Quirion Ranger. With Ashaya, Quirion Ranger counts as a forest. So that will allow Quirion Ranger to return herself to your hand with her own ability. Her ability is return a forest to your hand to untap a creature. Ashaya says Quirion Ranger is a forest. So you can return her to your hand in order to untap, well, for instance, Selvala. So let's say we've got Ashaya out as an 8/8. We tap a mana, we tap our Selvala, we make 8 mana. We've got Quirion Ranger in play. We're going to return the Quirion Ranger to our hand to untap Selvala. We're going to use one of the 8 mana to activate Selvala again and tap her for another 8 mana. Now we've got 15 mana. We're going to use one of those mana to cast our Quirion Ranger again. We're at 14. We'll return it to our hand again to untap Selvala. We're at 13. Then we're going to use one of those 13 to tap her again and we're going to just rinse and repeat, and that's infinite mana. So if we have Selvala, Ashaya, and Quirion Ranger, we make infinite mana. Then with Scrib Ranger, you just have to have a little bit more mana. It's got a slightly higher mana requirement, but it does the same thing. Literally, her text, the relevant text, is the same. She's not an elf, but she has flash, and she's got protection from blue, which does come up. And she says, return a forest you control to its owner's hand, untap target creature. Activate this ability only once per turn. Now, we're doing this over and over and over with this deck, but that's because each time we're going to return it to our hand. That's why we want to return it to our hand, so that when we recast that ranger, the game recognizes that as a new piece, and so you're allowed to use its ability over again. So this is probably, I would say, the most important combo. Ashaya with one of the rangers and a big mana dork like Selvala. That'll go infinite mana. There's some other ways to go infinite mana. I don't know how many we want to talk about, but we definitely want to get into at least the Temur Sabertooth. This is another key piece. Temur Sabertooth and Kogla. These are both real big pieces for the deck. So I'm just going to walk you through maybe one of the combos using these guys to make infinite mana. So let's say we've got Temur Sabertooth, and we have our big mana dork, which would be Selvala. And let's say we've got Phyrexian Soulgorger. So Phyrexian Soulgorger is an 8/8, meaning we can use Selvala. We need 1 mana to tap Selvala, and then we can make 8 mana. So basically, we're going to net 7 mana between Selvala and Phyrexian Soulgorger. We make 8 mana because of the 8/8, but it costs 1 to make the 8 mana, so it's a net 7 mana. Now we've got Temur Sabertooth in play. So if we've got Temur Sabertooth, and we've got Phyrexian Soulgorger, and we've got Selvala Heart of the Wilds, then how can we get from there to infinite mana? Well, one way we can do it, and there's lots of ways, but one way we can do it is we can use our Hyrax Tower Scout. So Hyrax Tower Scout, for 3 mana, you cast the Tower Scout. That's going to untap your Selvala. Then you're going to net 7 mana again. Remember, we're going to use 1 green to tap it, to activate it with Soulgorger to make 8 mana. So just assume every time we do this, it's 7 mana. Well, it's going to cost us 3 mana to play the Hyrax Tower Scout, which is going to untap the Selvala. You might as well say we're down to a net 4 mana. Because remember, the Selvala with Soulgorger nets 7. Hyrax Tower Scout costs 3, so we're down to a net 4. We're going to use 2 of that net 4 to return the Hyrax Tower Scout to our hand, and then we're going to recast it. Why does that seem like that doesn't work? Hold on. So we've got 3 mana for Tower Scout to cast it. That will untap Selvala. Okay, then we can use the Selvala again, and then we can use the 7 mana that we're netting to bounce the tower. Yeah, this works. Okay, so Hyrax Tower Scout costs 3 mana to cast, and it untaps our Selvala. Then Selvala will net 7 mana, and we can return the Hyrax Tower Scout to our hand with Temur Sabertooth for 2 mana. So every time we cast Tower Scout and bounce it, it's 5 mana. It costs us 5 mana to do that. In my initial little thing, I was counting the Hyrax Tower Scout twice. But you just have to do it once for every time you bounce it. So you make your 8 mana. So you have a land, you tap it, you have your Soulgorger, your Selvala. You tap a land to activate Selvala, you make 8 mana because you've got the Soulgorger out. Then you drop your Tower Scout. So you had 8 mana. Now you play for 3 of that 8 mana, you play the Tower Scout, untapping Selvala. You've got 5 mana. Now you're going to use one of those 5 to tap it again and make 8 more mana. That's going to bring you back up to 12 mana. Then you're going to use the Temur Sabertooth, 2 mana, because it has this ability for 2 mana, return another creature you control to your hand, and if you do, it gains indestructible till end of turn. Doesn't matter really about the indestructible, rarely comes up, but we're going to be able to bounce the Hyrax Tower Scout for 2 mana, and then we're going to be able to play the Hyrax Tower Scout again. And every time we play the Tower Scout and bounce the Tower Scout and play this Tower Scout and bounce the Tower Scout, that costs us a total of 5 mana. And so if we've got Selvala and enough mana to activate her, and we've got Phyrexian Soul Gorger, and we've got Temur Sabertooth in play, the Hyrax Tower Scout will net us infinite mana. These combos are a little bit complicated, and maybe I'm not doing the best job of explaining them, but I think if you just played with this deck, or even in the Goldfish thing, bring up the Moxfield Goldfish function, if you get the Phyrexian Soul Gorger out and you put the Selvala next to it with one forest, and then you've got the Temur Sabertooth, and you put the Hyrax Tower Scout in your hand, you'll figure it out. Just do that. Basically, the way to think about it is between playing the Tower Scout and bouncing the Tower Scout, that's 5 mana. You're going to net 7 mana between Phyrexian Soul Gorger and Selvala. So for 5 mana, you're netting 7 mana, and that means you're going to be able to make 2 extra mana on every iteration. So you can just keep doing that, and you'll go to infinite mana that way. You can also do this if you don't have access to your commander for whatever reason. You've got some other ways to do it. You can use Kirametra's Acolyte. Your devotion to green should usually be pretty good in this deck, and this is a 4-mana dork, but it taps for green equal to your devotion to green, which will be usually more than enough to do all of the same combos that you can do with Selvala. But she doesn't. The Selvala will draw you cards in a lot of cases where Kirametra's Acolyte will not. Okay, so while we're on the topic of the combo with Temur Sabertooth and Hyrax Tower Scout, let's move over to Kogla. So Kogla will do the exact same thing. Kogla has the same ability. So Kogla is a 6-mana 7/6. When it enters the battlefield, you can have it fight target creature. So you can kill a creature when it comes into play. And anytime it attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment the defending player controls. But for combo purposes, we're just worried about this bottom ability, which is basically the exact same thing as Temur Sabertooth, except it's only going to work on humans. So it's got 1 colorless and 1 green, so that's colorless green for 2 mana. Return target human you control to its owner's hand. And Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. As fortune would have it, Hyrax Tower Scout is a human. And so we can use Kogla with Hyrax Tower Scout just the same way that we would use Temur and Hyrax Tower Scout. So that's another way to do kind of the same combo. Another version is instead of using Hyrax Tower Scout with Temur Sabertooth, you can use Great Oak Guardian with Temur Sabertooth. Great Oak Guardian has the advantage of being able to buff your team every time you cast it. It's a 6-mana flash reach, and it says when Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls get +2/+2 until end of turn, and it untaps all your dudes. That's amazing. There's, I guess both those things are important. It says again, when Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls, the target is going to be you, get +2/+2 until end of turn, and you untap them. So if you've got a bunch of mana dorks in play, or even if you've just got Selvala tapping for a bundle, maybe you've got just Selvala, but you've got like a Galta out, so she's netting 11 mana. You've got your Temur out, and then you can bounce Great Oak Guardian for 2 mana, and then you can cast her for 6, and then that's going to untap your big mana dork, say Selvala, and then you can tap that to net 11 mana if you've got Galta out. The nice thing is too, even if you don't have a big mana dork available, if you've got enough just mana dorks out, you can use Great Oak Guardian to just keep untapping your mana dorks. So if you can bounce the Great Oak Guardian to hand and then recast it and bounce it and recast it and bounce it and recast it, you're going to make tons of mana, and you're also going to give your entire team +1 billion. So it's like it's part of the infinite mana combo, but it's also an outlet for the infinite mana. Like you're going to be able to a lot of times just kill everybody, alpha strike the table dead, just with this combo without having to put it into some other kind of outlet. But a lot of times your infinite mana combos will not have their own outlet. So let's say if we're going infinite mana with like Ashaya. One more way to make infinite mana with Ashaya. I included Layweaver. Layweaver is a 4-mana dork that has the ability to tap to untap 2 lands. So now if you have Lay Weaver and Ashaya, and let's say Karametra's Act, or let's just say Selvala, because Ashaya will be pretty big. So you've got Selvala, Ashaya, Lay Weaver. Well, Ashaya says that Lay Weaver, because she's a creature, Ashaya says all of your creatures are forests. Well, Lay Weaver says that you can tap Lay Weaver to untap 2 lands. Well, if Lay Weaver is a forest, then one of the 2 lands you're untapping can be Lay Weaver. So with Ashaya out, you can tap Lay Weaver to untap, say, Selvala and Lay Weaver, which means you can tap her again to do it again. You don't need a Selvala. You don't need like a really, even just like, let's say you have Karametra's Acolyte, Lay Weaver, and Ashaya. So automatically you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 devotion. Your devotion is 4 with just those 3 creatures. So that means Karametra's Acolyte will tap for 4 mana. So you can tap Karametra's Acolyte for 4 mana. Then you'll tap Lay Weaver, and you're going to be targeting Lay Weaver as one of the 2 lands you're going to untap, and Karametra's Acolyte as the other land you're going to untap. So you'll untap them both, and then tap them again, and untap them both, and then tap them again. So on and so forth, ad infinitum. You really, I mean, this thing doesn't have like a mana cost in its activation, so if you have just any mana dork, and Lay Weaver, and Ashaya, or if Ashaya doesn't have summoning sickness, because she'll tap for mana. So even just Ashaya, if she's not summoning sick, and Lay Weaver will go infinite mana just with those 2 cards alone. So there's tons of ways to make infinite mana in this deck. How are we doing on time? I feel scared to look. Yeah, not great. Okay, so we've talked about a number of ways to make infinite mana. There are others. You can do like a weird little line where you've got your big mana dork and you've got Temur Sabertooth, and you can use Wirewood Symbiote. Okay, so the way that would work is you tap your big mana dork, and let's say you make 6 mana off Selvala or Karametra's Acolyte, for instance. So you tap those 2. You tap your whatever one of those 2 mana dorks, say Karametra's Acolyte, to make a bundle of mana. If you've got Temur Sabertooth in play, you can use 2 of the. Well, first, you can use Wirewood Symbiote to return any of your mana dorks, any of your elves to play, to untap target creature. So Wirewood Symbiote, 1 mana, it's an insect. It says return an elf you control to its hand, or to your hand, to untap target creature. But you can only do it once per turn. So if you have doesn't matter, let's say Boreal Druid and a Wirewood Symbiote, both in play. You've got Temur Sabertooth and then Karametra's Acolyte or Selvala. So you've got a big mana dork, you've got Temur Sabertooth, you've got Wirewood Symbiote and Findhorn Elves, or a Boreal Druid. Doesn't matter what the other elf is. You can use the Wirewood Symbiote's ability to return, let's say, Boreal Druid to your hand to untap your, let's say, Karametra's Acolyte. Then you tap the Karametra's Acolyte again, say it makes 5 mana. Then you use 1 of those 5 mana, 2 of those 5 mana, to bounce the Wirewood with the Temur Sabertooth. So Temur Sabertooth is going to bounce the Wirewood Symbiote. Then you're going to cast the Mana Dork again, whichever one we return to our hand. We're going to cast the Wirewood again, so that's 2 mana. And then we're going to tap the Karametra's Acolyte again. So basically we're going to be using Wirewood Symbiote over and over by bouncing it back to our hand with Temur Sabertooth and then recasting it. So the way that'll work is we'll have Wirewood, Findhorn, Sabertooth, and Acolyte. We will tap the Acolyte. We'll return Findhorn Elf to hand using the Wirewood Symbiote's ability to untap Karametra's Acolyte. Then we're going to tap the Karametra's Acolyte again and make a ton more mana. We're going to use 2 of that mana to use our Temur Sabertooth to return the Wirewood Symbiote to our hand. Then we're going to use that mana, 2 more of that mana, to cast the Wirewood Symbiote and the Findhorn Elf. Put them both back into play so that we can, again, bounce the Findhorn to hand with Wirewood's ability to untap, say, Karametra's Acolyte, and just keep doing this over and over. That's probably the most complicated infinite mana combo. But we better move on to how we actually convert that into a win. There's so many ways, and they're a little bit complicated. Once we get infinite mana, let's say we've got, what's one of the easiest ways? One of the easiest ways to win the game once we have infinite mana is to outlet it with Duskwatch Recruiter. Duskwatch Recruiter has a mana ability an ability for 3 mana. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a creature from among them, and put it in your hand. Put the rest of those cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. If you do that infinite times, and you have infinite mana, then you can put all of your creatures into play. One of the creatures will be Ulvenwald Oddity. Ulvenwald Oddity, you can pay 7 of your infinite mana into and transform it, and it's going to be this behemoth that gives all of your creatures +1/+1 trample and haste. And it buffs them. It's a trample, haste. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. So if you have a way to play out all of your creatures, then you can, and you have infinite mana, then you can win the game on the spot, not having to pass the turn, just by playing out your Ulvenwald Oddity, transforming it, and swinging with all of your nasty dudes to make everybody dead. Another way that we'll commonly have to win is to draw our deck and do kind of the same thing. So how do we draw the deck? So one way we can draw the deck is we can be going through one of our little loops where we're bouncing something to hand and recasting it. And most of the time when you're winning the game with this deck, it's going to start, or at some point you're going to be doing that. At some point in the turn, you're going to be putting a creature card back to hand, playing it again, bouncing it, playing it again, bouncing it. So if you're bouncing a creature and recasting it, whether that be Greater Oak Guardian, or Wirewood Symbiote and Findhorn Elves, or whether that be Hyrax Tower Scout, whatever it is that you continually are bouncing to hand, Quirion Ranger, Scrib Ranger, and then recasting, that will trigger Beast Whisperer over and over and over. So if you have Beast Whisperer in play, that'll allow you to draw your entire deck. If you draw your deck with infinite mana, you win the game. There's tons of ways to do it, but a very simple way would be you draw all of your creatures, put them all into play, cast your Ulvenwald Oddity, pump mana into it to transform it, give your team haste, buff them, and swing for lethal. There's also loops you can do with Temur Sabertooth or Kogla. Where's Kogla? We can use Kogla or Temur Sabertooth to return Eternal Witness to our hand over and over and over. So we return the Ewit to hand, we recast it. Every time we're going to be returning some card to our hand out of the graveyard. That could be a tutor, and if we have a tutor, we can just keep, so we could tutor for whatever creature we want, cast that creature, play the Ewit, get the tutor, bounce the Ewit, cast the tutor, find a creature, cast it, put it in play, cast your Ewit to bounce the tutor. So you can use like Temur Sabertooth, Eternal Witness. So this is once you've got infinite mana. Temur Sabertooth with Eternal Witness, or Kogla with Eternal Witness, with any tutor or any draw effect, can just get you all of the creatures out of your deck, and you can play them all and win the game that way. You've got, what is it called? Beast Within? There's a pretty classic way to win the game with Beast Within. So we've done one of our loops where we've made infinite mana. So now we're going to cast our Beast Within, targeting one of our opponent's permanents, destroying that permanent, giving them a 3/3 beast token. Then we're going to return, say we've got Temur Sabertooth in play with Eternal Witness. Then we will bounce Eternal Witness to our hand with the Temur Sabertooth. We'll cast the Eternal Witness, and we'll get the Beast Within back. And then we'll use our infinite mana to cast the Beast Within again. And we'll blow up the next permanent, and the next permanent, and the next permanent. So we'll use the Beast Within and the Eternal Witness loop to blow up every permanent in play on our opponent's sides of the battlefields, even their lands. Everything goes. Now they've got a big old board full of 3/3s. Well, now we're going to use Kogla. So Kogla will come down, and it will fight one of our opponent's beast tokens. Then we will use Temur Sabertooth to return Kogla to our hand, and then we're going to recast Kogla again to kill another beast token. And so the end result of this is going to be that you've got a huge board and your opponents have no lands, no cards in play, nothing. So they'll concede or you'll just win. Most of the time you won't have to rely on that. You can just, well, and even if, okay, here's another thing you can do. If you're going through this loop, you could put one of your creatures in play. It doesn't matter. You could have a Boreal Druid, and after you're done beast withinning all of your opponent's things and killing them all with the fight ability of Kogla, then you could play your Boreal Druid out. You can beast within your Boreal Druid. You can use your Eternal Witness to pick up your beast within, and then you can bounce it again, play it again to pick up your Boreal Druid, recast your Boreal Druid, blow it up with a beast within, and then you can do the Eternal Witness with either Kogla or Temur Sabertooth to pick up the Witness, recast it, pick up the beast within, pick up the Boreal Druid, play the Boreal Druid, blow it up with the beast within, and you're going to just keep doing that over and over and over until you have a billion 3/3 beasts and your opponents have nothing. So that's not the cleanest win condition. If you're doing that, a lot of times you're going to have to pass the turn, but you're passing the turn to opponents that have literally 0 permanence, and you really don't have to do that very often. Most of the time you'll be able to find your Ulvenwald Oddity, and you'll just kill everybody that way. Or you'll have a bunch of creatures in play, and you'll use an Ewit loop to use Phyto Burst to give all of your creatures +5/+5 over and over and over. What are some other things worth talking about? Oh boy, this is going long. Staff of Domination and Umbral Mantle. So if you saw the Marwyn video, this is the same exact combo. These are probably the 2 easiest combos in the deck. The problem is they're hard, well, they're impossible to tutor. You can't find them directly with mono green. But what you can do is you can use your Rishkar's expertise, Return of the Wild Speaker type effects to just draw tons and tons of cards until you eventually find your Staff of Domination or your Umbral Mantle. The cool thing about Staff and Umbral Mantle is they're not only the infinite mana combo, but they also are the outlet for the infinite mana combo. So Umbral Mantle, for instance, if you have like 5 dudes in play, and one of them is Selvala, and one of them is like a 6/6 creature, then you can equip the Umbral Mantle for 0. Umbral Mantle says equipped creature has the ability to pay 3 and untap it to give that creature +2/+2 until end of turn. So, and it equips for 0. So if you equip the Umbral Mantle to Selvala, and you have, I mean, you don't even need a 6/6 in play, but let's just say for simplicity, you've got a 6/6 creature in play. You'll pay 1 mana, you'll tap your Selvala to make 6 mana. Now you're going to use 3 of those 6 mana to untap use Umbral Mantle to untap Selvala, giving her +2/+2. So now she's going to be a 4/4. And then you're going to tap her again to make more mana, and then you're going to use 3 of that mana to untap it again. And you're going to tap it again and use the mana to untap it again. Over and over until your Selvala is infinitely big and you've got infinite mana. Then you can start moving your Umbral Mantle around to all of your mana dorks, and you can equip your Lanor Elves. And you can kind of do the same exact thing with your Lanor Elves. You'll have to use the infinite mana you've already netted, but you'll be able to pump all of your mana producing dorks up until like they're 20/20, 30/30, 50/50, a billion of billions. And then you can swing out and kill everybody with the Umbral Mantle buffed dudes. Staff of Domination, same kind of thing. You've got a creature that is a 6/6. You've got Selvala tapping for 6 mana. You can pay 3 mana to untap Selvala. Then you can tap Selvala if you're netting 6 mana. You can tap Selvala again for 6 mana. You can pay 1 of those 6 mana to untap the staff. Then you can pay 3 of those 6 mana to untap Selvala. And then 1 of those 6 mana to untap or to activate Selvala. so on and so forth. So with Staff of Domination and at least netting 6 mana, which is easy to do. I mean, man, you can cast a Fido Burst on a Llanowar Elf. You are making 6 mana. You can scale something up to make 6 mana. There's tons and tons of ways to get there. You can have a Phyrexian Soulgorger in play. You can buff up something with a Great Oak Guardian. Even casting at one time turns your Pugnacious Hammerskull into an 8/8. And so with an 8/8 and Selvala and Staff of Domination, you are easily making infinite mana. Let's say you're netting 7 mana every time you tap 1 mana and activate Selvala, and you've got an 8-power creature. You made 7 mana. Of the 7 mana, you're going to spend 3 of them to tap the staff to untap Selvala. Then you're going to use 1 of the mana to activate Selvala, tap her, and make 8 mana. So now you're up to 11. Now you're going to pay 1 of those 11 to untap the staff. Now you're going to pay 3 to untap Selvala. You're going to put 1 of the mana into Selvala, tap it to make another 8 mana, so forth and so on until you've made infinite mana. And then you can use the Staff of Domination's 5 ability, the bottom ability, pay 5, tap it, draw a card, to draw a card, and then sink that infinite mana into tapping this to draw a card and then paying a mana to untap it. So for every 6 mana you put into it, you can just draw a card and untap it, draw a card, untap it. So you draw your deck, play all of your creatures out, pump them, swing in for lethal. So that's kind of I know it's a complicated deck. It's convoluted. This is convoluted. There's a lot going on here. And as you play the deck, you'll just keep finding more and more sideways cross synergies. It's a really, really interesting deck to play. And it pretty easily can go off turn 3, turn 4. I'd say it's probably going to go off on average. If it's totally unimpeded, if people are just going to let you goldfish, you'll win. You'll threaten a win by turn 4 most games. And I mean, almost all games. If you get the lines down and you learn to mulligan and exactly what you're looking for, you're able to convert big creatures into mana, convert that mana and having the big creatures into card draw, and convert mana and card draw into a combo. The combo is usually going to be for infinite mana, and then you're going to have a way to convert that infinite mana into a win. Those are sort of the steps. Okay, that is my buzzer telling me that I've gone too long. So I guess that's it, guys. And the next video is going to be me goldfishing this nasty prick of a deck. You know what, real quick. So just want to show... no, I was going to show the new pickups and the swaps and the changes, but that is my absolute stop the video buzzer saying that we're almost to 45 minutes. I just find people don't stick... Well, I'll say my videos that stay under 30 minutes tend to do the best. So I think that's going to do it for now. Selvala, thanks you for hanging in there with us. Stay tuned or come back and watch the next video where we're going to show how Selvala really does it in goldfishing. But until next time, word to your mothers, word to your fathers. May the force be with you. May the force be with your mother. May the force be with your father. Namaste. East side till I die. Let's see. Word to my nerd homies. Word to my nerd homies. Namaste. Navinat over and out. Peace.